Ahead on America This Week. Calls for death to America after the president orders the killing of a top Iranian general.
As long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Good morning.
And now Iran has fired back. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham is here to talk about timing, criticisms, and the Senate impeachment trial. Plus,
if you tell Congress, you tell the world, because nobody trusts the secrecy of Congress.
Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz weighs in and his response when I ask if he's planning to join the White House legal team. We also get the takeaway from Bronze Star recipient and intelligence officer Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer. That and so much more.
There it is. My gosh. It hasn't changed.
Right now on America This Week. Welcome to Sinclair's America This Week. I'm Eric Bolling. America This Week is the fastest growing political talk show broadcast across America. We strive to be fair, honest, and unbiased. In essence, America This Week is your night watchman for truth. General Qasem Soleimani was a very, very bad man. Soleimani was the general in charge of the elite fighting wing of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, lethal killers in the name of spreading Islamic rule across the country, across the globe. Qasem Soleimani was also the de facto leader of the terrorist group Hezbollah. Hezbollah has a network of over 50,000 members with one goal in mind: wipe Israel off the map, period. And that means they destroy anyone who gets in their way. As an ally of Israel, that means America is target number 2. Qasem Soleimani and Hezbollah are responsible for literally hundreds of American casualties. President Trump did what the Bushes, the Clintons, and an Obama failed to do. I say good riddance. Bottom line, the world is a safer place with Qasem Soleimani disintegrated. But what I can't grasp is the wave of sympathy that followed for a hardened terrorist killer like Soleimani. Colin Kaepernick tweeted this, basically calling it racist. Nike, you must be so proud. Delete yourself, Kaepernick. How about Rose McGowan tweeting this? You have to read this. The U.S. says, disrespect your country, our flag, our people. 52% of us humbly apologize. Please do not kill us. Rose, all due respect. But do you realize Iran kills gays for, wait for it, being gay? Iran treats women as second-class citizens, and Iran perpetrates terror around the world. Do you realize you're defending that, Rose? You do, right? Right? Lurking, however, the bottom of the cesspool was George Lopez, who calls himself a comedian. After the Iranian leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, put an $80 million bounty on our president's head, George Lopez posted on Instagram that he would kill the president himself for half that amount. Not funny, Lopez. Hope a couple Secret Service agents pay you a visit, probably the biggest audience you've had in quite a while. Take a second and listen to the Iranian leaders calling for death to America. These people hate America. We should leave the region and watch it slither back into the dark ages, which they apparently never quite made their way out of. We should spend no more blood and treasure in a place where people hate us this much. By the way, the Iraqi parliament, the same Iraq we just spent $2 trillion and lost 5,000 American men and women liberating from another murderous dictator, Saddam Hussein, just voted to send us home. Wow. Good luck with that, Iraq. P.S. The new Iranian general who took over for Qasem Soleimani is Brigadier General Ismail Ghani. Pro tip to his buddies, if General Ghani offers them a ride to the restaurant after the meeting, I'd meet him there. And in his speech Wednesday, President Trump called economic sanctions against Iran and said the country would never have nuclear weapons. As Sinclair correspondent James Rosen reports, the underlying forces that brought the two countries to hostilities are only growing more pronounced.
Flanked by senior officials in the White House Grand Foyer, President Trump offered something for everyone in his remarks on the Iran crisis, from the language of de-escalation.
Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
To vows of new non-lethal action.
The United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime.
The commander-in-chief talked tough, but Mr. Trump also appealed to Europe, Russia, and China to revive multilateral diplomacy.
And we must all work together toward making a deal with Iran that makes the world a safer and more peaceful place.
The president's remarks came 18 hours after Iran launched nearly 24 ballistic missiles at U.S. soldiers in Iraq in an attack that produced no casualties. Daybreak disclosed that 2 of the missiles failed to detonate. But with Iranians still mourning top military commander and terror mastermind Qasem Soleimani slain last week in a strike ordered by President Trump, the region remained on edge.
Anyone who tries to attack us will suffer the most devastating blow.
The U.S. and Iran have come closer to war than this. In April 1988, after Iranian mines damaged an American destroyer in the Persian Gulf, the U.S. Navy fired on 2 Iranian oil platforms, 3 naval vessels, and 2 small boats, severely damaging or destroying them all. Then as now, an American president sought to show both resolve and restraint.
We aim to deter further Iranian aggression, not provoke it.
Perhaps the most surprising element in President Trump's speech was his vow to seek greater involvement in the Middle East from NATO, the military alliance originally formed to contain the Soviet threat in Europe, and one Mr. Trump routinely disparages. Reporting from Capitol Hill for America This Week, James Rosen. Eric?
Thank you, James. We're just days into the new year, and between Iran and the upcoming Senate impeachment trial, 2020 has already been a very busy year for the president. Stephanie Grisham, White House press secretary and communications director, joins me. Thank you for being here again, Stephanie. Appreciate your time. I can't believe I'm starting with this, but this is all about Twitter. Oh my gosh. All right, let's start with this. President tweeted a threat. Then he tweeted a warning. The Iranians responded with a threat. There was a fight going back and forth. Soleimani was killed. They bombed our bases.
They did.
This is all over Twitter. Did Twitter save a war?
You know, Twitter has been an interesting tool, obviously, for the president. He was used heavily in the election, but also he used it to talk to Kim Jong-un. If you remember that, he arranged a meeting with him through Twitter. I don't know if Twitter saved a war. I think the president did that. I think the president worked very hard on this and decisive. So Twitter, though, is key to the president and his success.
So I'm watching Twitter late at night, and I see that Caitlin Collins at CNN tweets something to the effect that while this was going on, there was panic in the hallways of the White House and in the Situation Room. And then you tweeted back, we should have a couple of these tweets, you tweeted back saying this is not true, it's never been true, this is completely wrong. And just add to this one last recent tweet from CNN PR division saying, I can't believe Stephanie Grisham would say something like this, 100% true, they stand by their story.
Yeah, that's par for the course. A lot of times, a lot of outlets, not just them, will stand beside their anonymous sources. The fact is that several reporters did not check with us. They did not ask. They saw some people with some equipment and assumed that there was going to be an address. It caused panic with all the other press corps. A lot of press came to the White House because of that tweet. Other outlets started to tweet that it was happening. People were leaving their families and events to come to the White House because they thought he was giving an address, and it would have been so simple to just ask us.
Steph, that was one issue, and I remember, yes, he's going to make an address. Then we all thought because there were no U.S. casualties that the address was going to wait until the next day, which it was. But there was also the reportage by Jeff Zeleny at CNN and Caitlin Collins that there were staffers that were freaking out about what the president was going to do, not about the address, but about what he was going to do
And
next.
that was inaccurate. I was there the whole night. We were in meetings. He was calm. He had been briefed all day. He was briefed throughout the night. And then we waited until the morning to make sure that there were no casualties, and then he made his remarks. There was never a plan. And the problem with that, I didn't mean to call out just one network or outlet. I would have done that to anybody. It was irresponsible, and it caused a panic in a time when I think the country was probably a little bit nervous.
Oh, we were all nervous.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you what else made me nervous, and I saw him as out. Like, we got to call him out. Listen, if we do it, we'll call ourselves out too. But MSNBC cited Iranian television and said, quoted, 30 American casualties, 30 deaths.
Correct. It was absolute propaganda. Propaganda from a country that had just attacked us, and that, clearly they want Americans dead. And so, of course, they're going to say that because they're trying to tell their people that they were successful. Again, so irresponsible, and didn't check with us, didn't bother to ask. I did not get an inquiry from that reporter. None of my team did. And really irresponsible to use social media that way.
Are they failing?
That's a tough question. I think in this instance, those examples, yes, they failed, and they're failing the public.
They're either failing or they're purposely biased. So it's got to be one or the other. Because here we have two misinformation campaigns that went on, one by CNN, one by MSNBC. Neither network has been very favorable to the president whatsoever.
I'll tell you this: I will give them the benefit of the doubt for those two instances, but I do think they are biased. I think that just in this instance, Soleimani got coverage that not about all of the horrible acts he had done, not about all of the people who had been killed under his regime, and not about the people who had been maimed, military. People on the networks and CNN, all of them, they were talking about how sad everybody was. It was almost like they were mourning his death and thought that we were bad to have done that. So in that way, I do think they were biased.
You were in the Situation Room. You mentioned that. Can you give us a sense? Most of our audience, most people in America and the world don't know what goes on in the Situation Room. Give us a sense of what was happening when all we're hearing is tens of ballistic missiles, not just bombs, ballistic missiles, which are very dangerous, are falling on, could be our troops.
I can speak generally that he is being briefed by his national security team and by his top advisors. They gather the information, they relay it to him. He makes decisions based upon that. He was briefed all throughout the day. A lot of times,
was he warned?
Was he warned?
Were we warned, of an Iranian attack that was going to happen? I mean, we have to look back and thank God there were no U.S. casualties.
Absolutely.
But how is that possible without being warned in advance and moving your assets out of the way, including personnel?
We have great intelligence, and because of that, we were able to get people to safety. And so that is something that's really amazing.
So it's based on our skill with our CIA and military, not based on someone from the Iranian side calling saying,
correct,
hey, this is happening today.
Our intelligence was very good, and we were able to get people to safety. It was wonderful.
All right. Everyone asks me to ask you this because they all want to know. Press briefings. They're coming back?
I'll give you the same answer I give you every time. The day the president wants me to do it, I will. I'll tell you, the other day, an outlet counted how many days it had been since the last briefing, and they were, talking about transparency. It's so important. It's interesting. I talk to probably 5 or 6 reporters from each network every day, let's say. I help them out with various stories. In the press briefing room at the podium, I would talk to one reporter and maybe give them 2 questions. They get more information from me and more help from me behind the scenes, in my office, via email, text, interviews, than they would from the podium. I am really proud of what the president has done. I'm really proud that we put subject matter experts out there to brief the press. People like Pompeo in this instance, and Esper and Milley and the president in this instance, they are the subject matter experts, and they are the people our country needs to hear from, not me. So I'm still proud of what we're doing, and I do talk to the press all of the time.
I get a call from, true story, New York Times right before the interview, because I tweeted that you were going to be on the show last night, and they said, did you have Stephanie Grisham on? What did she say? I want to hear. And I said, no, you have to watch it live. And you're watching it right now. They really want to know what's going on with you. They're really intrigued by Stephanie Grisham.
Yeah, I think that my approach to things have been different than my predecessors. Sean and Sarah, I'm very, very close with. They were much more forward-facing, but also I have 3 different roles at the White House, so I have a lot of other things to do. I think that people aren't sure of me because I'm not out at the podium. I'm not fighting with them. It's not, public. I'm not giving them their ratings. That's okay. I talk to them all the time. I talk to the New York Times all the time. I am as accessible as I can be. I do believe I serve the press corps.
A couple of quick questions. Cardi B is applying for Nigerian citizenship because she's afraid of what's going on with Iran. Any advice to Cardi B?
Best of luck. Good luck. Great.
And Harry and Meghan Markle are pulling away from their royal duties. Does the president have a thought on that?
So I actually got a lot of inquiries on that today, which shocked me with what is going on in the world and the country. I don't think the president probably even knows. He's pretty busy. He's focused on some pretty important things. I'm sure he wishes them well.
We wish him well. How are you holding up?
I'm doing great. I'm very proud of this president, and I'm very proud of this administration, and I think that the country should feel really good right now. We've got a president who is being so strong and so decisive and is keeping America first as he promised. And again, no American lives were lost this week, and it's amazing. So everything's great.
Stephanie Grisham, everybody. Thank you again, Stephanie.
Thank you.
As always. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer is an intelligence expert and joins us with his perspective on the situation unfolding with Iran. Colonel Schaffer, thank you for being here. So,
Eric, thanks for
having me. Did you know Soleimani, or you fought in battles against Soleimani?
So my direct experience was in Afghanistan in 2003, where we had elements of the Quds Force under the IRGC actually funding the initial insurgency against us. Now think about this, Eric. This is Afghanistan, in a place near the border of Pakistan, and our special forces captures incidental to combat operations in Iranian. And next thing you know, an FBI agent, I'll just call him Matt, and I are sent out to the front to do an interrogation. It took us 2 days to break him. Turned out they had sent $65,000 over for the purposes of funding the death of Americans. So I faced off directly with the IRGC. We did, and then he did the same thing in Iraq. And I'm told by my congressional sources who actually have been monitoring all this, Soleimani was indeed the one behind that entire effort in both Afghanistan and in Iraq.
And not only that, Colonel, he's credited with, or I hate to say credit with, but the idea of using roadside devices to blow American military, their limbs off, to be walking billboards for
shaped charges,
for Islamic fanaticism.
Right. So he's credited, and nobody disputes this numbers. At least 600 Americans directly dead based on his activities, I would think, based on other incidental acts to include planning, provision of logistical support, and things of the like, into the thousands. And let me be very clear on this point. This man was a terrorist. There was no declared state of war between the United States and Iran, yet this man, trying to use the flag of Iran in a uniform, attempted to hide the very fact that he, as a terrorist, and Iran as a nation, sought to use terror as a method of warfare. And he is, and was, past tense clearly, was a legitimate target in a battlefield in Iraq, not on a mission of peace, but on a mission to actually plan additional attacks against U.S. citizens, U.S. forces. So this was a legitimate shoot. I don't care what the congressional folks said today after the briefing. This was there was real intelligence indicating he was up to no good, and the president made the right call.
You know, Brigadier General Ismail Ghani is now taking over. He's the number 2 at the IRG, or the Quds Force.
Right.
What do we expect from him? Is he just a protege of Qasem Soleimani?
He's a deputy, and I think not as aggressive. And I think this is where we'd like to believe the fact that that Soleimani ended up dead will be an indicator of what may happen in the future if he decides to follow in these footsteps. This is not acceptable, Eric. The idea that a nation state tries to use a military uniform and a flag to justify and try to immunize themselves from being targets on the battlefield. I can tell you that based on General Mark Milley being the chairman and the president having the current policy, these people will not be safe if they continue to engage in terror acts throughout the Middle East.
Colonel, I don't know if you and I are going to agree on this, but would you say it would be smart to take Iraq up on their parliament's advice to vote to remove the U.S. from any sort of presence in Iraq? I would be more than willing to get the hell out of that hellhole.
I feel the same way about Afghanistan. No, you and I are in lockstep on this. The only two things we should be concerned about is denying territory for terrorists to gain access and train. ISIS was a necessary evil. We had to go in and take care of that, no doubt. Same with Al-Qaeda. That's been done. I think we need to find a way to allow for governance to return to those spaces. Ungoverned space is a magnet for terrorists, but it's not our job, Eric, to run the country for the Iraqis or run the country for the Afghans. It's time we find a path out of both nations.
Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer, thanks for being with us again, sir. We'll be right back with famed attorney Alan Dershowitz, why he says Trump's actions against Iran were perfectly legal. And you do not want to miss his response when I asked if he's joining the president's legal team. Stay with us.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Let's get right to the interview segment. He's a renowned lawyer, Harvard Law School professor emeritus, and best-selling author, Alan Dershowitz. Full disclosure, Alan and I go way back. We go, I don't know, a long time back with the old O'Reilly days. Alan, thank you for joining us. Alan,
thank you.
Let's start with the Iranian situation. This whole week we've been back and forth, tit for tat with the Iranians. The left is telling America that Trump had no legal standing to take out Qasem Soleimani. Your thoughts?
It's not even a close question. President Trump had far greater legal authority to take out Soleimani than President Obama had to take out Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was a has-been, a past tense, somebody who was being punished for what he had done, legitimately and completely justly. The United States had to send missiles and soldiers into a foreign country without permission. In the Soleimani case, we were in Iraq with the permission of the authorities. He was not being punished only for what he had done in the past, but to prevent him from killing Americans in the future. He is a military commander in uniform. There couldn't be a clearer case for presidential authority under our Constitution or under international law to engage in targeted killing or preemptive self-defense. I wrote a book about this called Preemption back 10, 15 years ago, in which I laid out the criteria for when targeted killing is appropriate. This is the paradigm for when it's appropriate.
And I assume President Obama famously killed an American, al-Awlaki, 16-year-old American citizen who had an upbringing in the Middle East. However, he was an American nonetheless.
No question that that was a greater question of ability. This one is the clearest case possible. This is something that Israel has done over the years, and it's prevented lots of loss of life. When you kill terrorists who are planning to kill your people, you act in the highest tradition of the Bible, which says, if somebody comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. In every religion, every culture, every civilization, for self-defense.
Senator Tim Kaine says that President Trump needed authorization. He needed the authorization to use military force, meaning he needed to address Congress. Did he?
No, absolutely not. First of all, none of the previous presidents sought authorization for the killing of a terrorist. You don't seek authorization when you have to make an immediate decision. This guy Soleimani could have just changed his routine and deviated 10 minutes and would have avoided being killed. If you tell Congress, you tell the world, because nobody trusts the secrecy of Congress. We know that President Obama prevented Israel from killing Soleimani back some years ago because they tipped off the Iranians, and the Iranians had Soleimani changed. How many lives would have been saved if Israel had been allowed to kill him back in the day?
You know, Alan, I noticed that you say it was a justified killing that President Trump had that was due process or constitutional, at least. But what's not constitutional, you tell me, is the impeachment of President Trump. Make that case.
That's right. Oh, it's not even a close question either. The Constitution provides for 4 criteria for impeachment: treason, bribery, other high crimes, and misdemeanors. None of them have been met here. The allegations are of abuse of power, which every president since John Adams has been accused of, and obstruction of Congress, which doesn't exist as a crime or as even an incident, because a president's entitled to demand judicial review before he submits to subpoenas when he has a plausible claim of executive or other kind of privilege. So neither of the 2 articles of impeachment rise to the level of an impeachable offense, and they're both unconstitutional. Hamilton and Madison would be turning over in their graves if they saw how the impeachment provision was being used in a partisan way here. Look, I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted against Donald Trump. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I supported the civil liberties of Richard Nixon back in the 1970s. I supported the civil liberties and was against the impeachment of Bill Clinton. So I've been consistent for 50 years, but Democrats
They don't seem to be consistent. Alan, let me very quickly, there was a couple of pictures floating around you at Mar-a-Lago around Christmas time or so, shaking hands, talking with the president. Are you planning on joining either the legal team head by Cipollone and Sekulow for the administration and or the team head by Rudy Giuliani defending the president personally?
I can't comment on any requests or non-requests of me to join any legal team. I can tell you that it's been reported in the press, and I've had some discussions with some people in the White House, but right now... Can
you tell us which one, the White House or the president's personal team?
Well, I've been speaking to both people and the president himself when I met him at Mar-a-Lago, not about this, but just, holiday greetings, and he met with my wife, and we had very good conversations, but I'm not free to disclose the nature of conversations with the president or with the White House.
Good lawyer there. Before we go, I just want to point out, Alan Dershowitz was the law professor to none other than Senator Ted Cruz. You say he was a great student, scholarly student. And your latest book, The Case Against Removing Trump by Alan Dershowitz. Everyone go out and pick up that book right now. Alan, thank you very much. And now let's hear from both sides of the aisle, going head-to-head. University of Maryland lecturer and Democratic strategist Jason Nichols, and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, host of America First on the Salem Radio Network. And don't forget this, author of his latest book, The War for America's Soul, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Pick up that book. In the meantime, well, a lot to talk about, a lot going on. How did I asked Stephanie Grisham, are we in an age where Twitter is going to dictate the outcome of wars?
It's truly insane, Eric. I had a kind of vision today that we've all stepped into a time machine and we're back in the 1960s and 70s. This event in Iraq is like the Vietnam War again. We have half of the elite, not the American people, half of the elite who are rooting for our enemies. When you have Bernie Sanders, a candidate for president potentially, when you have Chris Matthews, when you have show hosts saying that the president of the United States murdered a foreign government official, not a terrorist with 603 American servicemen's blood on his hands, this is unconscionable.
Did President Trump do anything wrong?
I think he did a few things wrong. I think, number one, he should have alerted our allies. I think that his tweet about hitting cultural sites was a big mistake. It put actually... he
walked it back.
Yeah, he walked it back, but putting that out there, that's something that terrorists are going to use as a recruiting tool.
You mean ISIS, who destroyed Iraqi cultural sites?
Remember that? Exactly, but they're going to use it and say that they hate us in that part of the world.
In fact, Tim Kaine is pushing a bill that requires the president, no matter what he does militarily, he's got to go to Congress for it. I remember, wasn't that too long ago, I remember President Obama killing an American citizen. Anwar al-Awlaki was a 16-year-old American. Granted, bad guy, but killed him with a drone strike, never asked for permission.
Yeah, so look, we can talk about the mistakes made with the Obama administration and their foreign policy. There are probably some things that you and I will agree on, and Seb will agree on, in terms of mistakes that were made. But again, when you're not letting Congress know, when you're not necessarily letting people, even the briefing today, people say was unsatisfactory, that's a problem. This is a co-equal branch of government. They declare war. They need to be briefed on.
War's different, but Seb, war's different. Declaring war is a little bit different than taking out a terrorist. But Seb, there's a very important point that Jason's making, and I'm trying to figure out why Rand Paul and Mike Lee, I know they're libertarian. I get that. I'm trying to be a libertarian, but for them to walk out of a briefing from Pompeo and from the State Department and from high-level intel and walk out of this meeting and say, I think I'm on board with Tim Kaine on the other side, saying that President Trump can't lift a finger militarily without our permission.
Senator Paul has an ideological box that he likes to live in, and he's an isolationist. And in this world, after 9/11, it just doesn't wash. I understand. Stupid wars forever, wars had to stop. That's why we elected President Trump. But the legislation is clear. If there is imminent danger to our troops, the incumbent president can take military action, and within 30 days, tell Congress why he did it. I spoke to my friends in the administration right after Soleimani was killed. They told me that we had exquisite intelligence that was presented to the president, not only where he was, but he was going to kill hundreds of Americans and Muslims.
No doubt he killed and maimed hundreds, looking to do more. Quick thought, final thought?
So the thing is, if you're going to pursue military action, why not brief Congress? Why not brief the various committees? And the other thing is, in terms of the briefing today, it was unsatisfactory. Even some of the Republicans, beyond just Mike Lee, said it was unsatisfactory.
Yeah, once in a while there is that. I mean,
And an imminent threat. Where was the imminent threat? That's Pompeo. Pompeo didn't give us
no question.
There was no.
Can we all agree Soleimani needed to die?
Long time ago.
I think nobody's
mourning. Ahead in Pulse of America, he went from Republican to Libertarian. Now back to Republican. Next, former Governor Bill Weld explains why he thinks the party has changed and his strategy to beat Trump in 2020. And opioid overdoses go up when the temperature goes down. 3 reasons that could be behind the spike. You don't want to miss this. They could help save a family member or a friend's life. And this one hits close to home for me. A family is left mourning after the unthinkable happens. A father and his 9-year-old daughter go hunting on New Year's Day and end up dead. The tragic mistake and their special bond. Don't miss it, coming up next. A New Year's Day tradition for a South Carolina family ends in the tragic deaths of a father and his young daughter. And the chill of winter has a surprising impact on opioid deaths, and it's not good. But first, in our Pulse of America, he's one of the few Republicans challenging President Trump in the upcoming election. Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, has a campaign conversation with Bill Weld, who was the vice presidential nominee in 2016 for the Libertarian Party.
At a pub in Washington, D.C., a city where strategy is key to any political victory, Bill Weld has to be extraordinarily cunning. Then again, the former Massachusetts governor is a master at plotting out moves.
I feel like I'm kind of walking into the lion's den right here. But is this true, this rumor that you, back in school in Harvard, could play 3 games simultaneously blindfolded?
Sure. I mean, if you play a lot of games out of the chess books and the magazines, you get the board pretty much in your head,
And you can pretty well keep it in your head for 20-25 moves.
He'll need to be even more impressive if this Republican is going to successfully primary President Trump. The president has great popularity numbers within his own party.
Sure.
Money coming in hand over fist.
Right.
Do people say, what are you doing?
Well, no, not really, because the strategy is fairly simple. It's to focus on the 24 states that permit crossover voting.
I'm guessing you'd love the opportunity to debate the president. Do you think that's going to happen?
No, I certainly don't. The one time the president uttered my name in this cycle, he said, I'm not going to debate Bill Weld or anybody else.
As someone who was a Republican governor, you later supported President Obama, you became a libertarian, you're back to Republican. Do you think people question your party credibility?
Not really. I mean, I'm from the libertarian side of the Republican coalition.
But the party's changed a lot since you were in office. Do you
Well,
look
it's
at
changed with Mr. Trump because he's an isolationist, which the Republican Party never was. And he doesn't believe in free trade, which the Republican Party always did. And he doesn't believe in balancing budgets or avoiding overspending.
Weld, as governor, cut taxes 21 times. You've talked about how you, in a way, are kind of the millennial candidate. What is it that you think you can draw upon?
Well, it's not my age. It's definitely my appeal.
And ideas like trying to save Social Security for future generations or tackling climate change immediately.
Climate change is the #1 issue on the table that we have to address with both hands.
And Weld believes there's another way to win over younger voters.
Mobile voting, so people could vote with a cell phone. It already recognizes a fingerprint and iris, and that would bring out the millennials. Only 49% of them voted in the last election. So I'll go ahead here. Checkmate. See, I told you it wouldn't take 25 moves.
Did that really just happen? That's a little demoralizing what just happened there. All right, you ready for a little lightning round?
Sure.
Ban on assault weapons?
No, I would. You know, I think the solution to the gun issue and mass shootings is to have so-called red flag laws.
Should sanctuary cities get full federal funding?
Yeah, I would not penalize sanctuary cities.
Medicare for all?
Absolutely not.
Should marijuana be decriminalized?
Absolutely. The fact that it's still a Schedule I substance in Washington is an outrage.
What are your odds of beating President Trump?
I think they're better than 1 in 50. If I'd move as much on Mr. Trump as I did in September for the next 2 months, I'm ahead in New Hampshire. And I've got 2 months. So there.
Governor, thank you very much. I wish you as much luck out on the campaign trail as you have here.
Thank you, Scott. That's all I'll need.
It's the heart of winter, and opioid overdoses tend to spike when temperatures drop. Kathleen Jacob with Sinclair station WZTV in Nashville, Tennessee, explains why this happens and how to keep loved ones safe.
We talked with someone who struggled with addiction and now helps others. He explains cold temperatures mean isolation, and that's one of the biggest things that can lead to an overdose. Evan Radke knows what it's like to try and hide an addiction to opioids.
And when I was in it, I lived basically a double life. And you call it a chameleon effect, where you can adapt to what I think you want me to be. And you never know that I was struggling with, say, opiate addiction or alcoholism.
He remembers winter being one of the hardest times surviving his addiction.
Well, it's very easy to get in that isolation mode. When you have doom and gloom outside, if it's a rainy day or if it's cold or it's gray, it kind of matches how you feel. And my solution to dealing with all my underlying issues is to treat it with alcohol and drugs.
He says the spike in overdoses in the winter stems from 2 major things: cold temperatures and forced interaction with friends and family.
The thing that I'm obsessed with is killing me, but I can justify it really easily because it's a cold day. I don't want my family to know I can't go into active withdrawals. Maybe I'll make sure this time, especially being around people that care about me and know who I am, maybe I'll take a little bit extra caution and make sure I'm getting enough drugs or enough alcohol so I can make sure I'm myself and not this chaotic person.
On the other hand, addiction expert Brian Sullivan says cold temperatures can keep people from realizing they're even experiencing an overdose.
When your body goes into chills to let you know, hey, when your body does that, it's to warm up your body. It's to move your body and let you know that you're too cold and try to warm you up. But when you are on an opioid high, oftentimes that has a numbing effect.
A numbing effect that turns deadly fast. Despite this being one of the toughest times, people actually reach out for help less in the winter months, making excuses about wanting to be with family over the holidays instead of seeking treatment. For America This Week, I'm Kathleen Jacob. Eric, back to you.
Kathleen, thank you. And WZTV in Nashville. A New Year's Day tradition for a South Carolina family ended in the worst possible way. A dad and his daughter were hunting, but an accident took both of their lives. Ann Emerson with Sinclair Station WCIV in Charleston explains the pair's special bond.
Kim Drawdy and his little girl were completely devoted to one another. That's what family and friends told me when we visited the Drawdy property on the outskirts of town. A connection rooted in their love of the outdoors.
They were like that. She loved her dad to death.
Now family and friends are grieving the untimely death of 30-year-old Kim Drawdy and his 9-year-old daughter, Lauren.
Walterboro people, our minds are blown. We don't know details other than hearsay, and that's a lot of it in Walterboro.
DNR officials say the accident happened here on Barricada Road. Kim and his daughter were hunting with 2 other people. The group was trying to drive or move deer in the area. That's when officials say Kim and Lauren were mistaken for one of the animals and shot. Benny Drawdy, Kim's older brother, says he was at a New Year's Day oyster roast when he got the terrible news.
Your brother's been shot, and I didn't know about his daughter.
Father and daughter were found about a half-mile in from the road.
With her daddy all the time.
Daddy. She hunted with him all the time. He
went hunting, she was right there. He went anywhere, she was right there.
The large Drawdy family gathered to mourn, including Kim's twin brother.
I couldn't believe it. It was just devastating. I mean, they do this hunt every year, and this time it just turned out to be tragic.
And I'll never lose the pain of losing Kim. That's how good a guy he was.
The coroner tells us that both father and daughter died of gunshot wounds to the torso. For America This Week, I'm Ann Emerson. Back to you, Eric.
Every week, we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Deputy Sheriff Chris Dickerson of the Panola County Sheriff's Office in Texas was shot and killed during a traffic stop on December 31st. Deputy Dickerson was a U.S. Army veteran and was with the Panola County Sheriff's Office for 8 years. He leaves behind his wife and 2 daughters. Master Patrol Officer Spencer Bristol with the Hendersonville, Tennessee Police Department was killed on December 30th. He was hit by a car while chasing a suspect. Officer Bristol was a Navy veteran and served the police department for more than 4 years. He leaves behind his wife and a daughter. Rest in peace, officers. All right, let's get to debate number 2. Facing off, Democratic strategists Kevin Chavez and writer, co-host of the podcast Bipartisan. Did I say that right?
You did.
Bipartisan. And co-chair of Right Now Women PAC. Gene Card, thank you both for joining us. Let me start with this story of Arkansas judge granting Hunter Biden's request to postpone his trial. Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, it looks like there's been some confusion, right? Like, is this his child? Is it not? Now we know that it is.
This is a custody case. The baby mama is suing or looking to sue Hunter Biden. She wants some relief. She wants financial support.
Yep.
Hunter's saying no.
Yeah.
Didn't he make like dozens of millions of dollars recently?
This is so hard to understand. I mean, I read a bunch of stories about this today, and I could not figure out what he is possibly thinking, feeling. How it's his child. I mean,
Kevin,
where is he?
What about it? I mean, look, they've already done a paternity test. He's baby daddy. He's got a lot of money. What's the issue here? Is this hurt Joe Biden? Let me ask you this: does this hurt Joe Biden's presidential hopes?
I personally don't think so, and I think that's what the GOP is trying to do through Hunter Biden. I think they've been doing it with the Ukraine allegations related to his time with Burisma, now with this. And I don't think that voters are really going to turn away from Joe Biden to support President Trump because of drama within his family. I think, if anything, may play into the sympathy that Joe Biden gets, given the fact that he had a wife and a child that passed away.
And Gene, shouldn't children of candidates and politicians be off limits?
I do tend to agree with that, and I don't think
even adult children.
Well, that's a fair question, whether the adult children choose to become involved in politics themselves. I mean, this changes the game. And I do think that even if we say it's not right to involve the children or to blame the sins of the children on the parent, the fact of the matter is it may not be right to do that, but it's how it works and how it happens, and this will affect Biden. It will. It looks very unfeeling and uncaring, and that's not good.
Kevin, what do you think of what's going on? Let's switch over to the impeachment story. A lot going back and forth. We're understanding that there are articles of impeachment. Well, whatever. The articles get delivered. What should McConnell and the Republican senators do?
Well, in my opinion, we should hear from witnesses, and I think that I'm happy that Senator McConnell said he's open to at least having a trial like the one in 1999, where we at least got depositions from several individuals. So I think we should at least do that. But it looks like he is starting to come more towards what Democrats want. So maybe Pelosi's strategy is having at least a little bit of an impact, because he's at least admitted to seeing the value in having at least some statements from witnesses.
Gene, and I wonder if this is backfiring on the Democrats, because President Trump's approval rating post-impeachment from the moment it was announced by Nancy Pelosi that they were going to seek impeachment inquiry to the present, the most recent poll, it's gone up.
Oh, it's absolutely backfired on them. No question. No question. Nancy Pelosi is now in the rearview mirror on this, okay? She scored the only point she could, which was a vote for impeachment, and then she tried to leave the field, right? She scored her point, she tried to walk off the field. Doesn't work. Mitch McConnell's got the ball now, and it's his show.
You have a situation now where an impeachment is actually helping the president somehow, and also in times of conflict, in times of war, in times of deploying military force, presidents do very well as well. This is a perfect storm against the Democrats.
Well, I think it's important that we hear testimony from people that may be able to shed more light on what happened in and around that call with the Ukrainian president in July. But there are a lot of people that are still split. It looks like the country, is sort of already baked into their side on this. I don't think that the proceedings changed a lot of people's minds. It's still close to 50-50 in terms of people who think the president should be removed or stay in office.
Kevin and Gene, appreciate your time. Got to leave it right there.
All right, thank you.
Next Wednesday, I'll be joining the conservative squad at the Washington, D.C. Chamber of Commerce. That's from 11:45 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. It's Wednesday. It's open to the public. I hope to see you all there. It should be really, really cool. Come join us all, learn about the conservative squad versus that other squad on the other side. Ahead, Amber Phillips with the Washington Post joins us to talk balls and strikes. Her take on the battles between the Republicans and Democrats when it comes to impeachment and how both sides are repeating the past. Let's talk balls and strikes. She's a reporter for the Washington Post. The Fix, which covers Congress. Amber Phillips is back with us. Welcome, Amber.
Hi.
So let's start with the Iranian situation. It's been bubbling up all week with President Trump making the announcement. Talk about what Congress thinks President Trump did right and did wrong with taking out Soleimani.
It depends who you talk to. We hear Republicans say President Trump was well within his right to take out Soleimani without notifying Congress because it was just a one-off. Experts I talk to say that generally is right with terms of the War Powers Act. If it's just a one-off strike and there's no likelihood of engaged military conflict, the president doesn't need to go to Congress. This is within the president's power. Democrats see things very differently. They see the potential for Iran to strike back, for us to maybe strike back Iran, and on and on and on. And to them, that's an escalated military conflict. Trump should have notified them, and Trump, under the authority of the War Powers Act, would need approval from Congress to keep this thing going.
Talk to me a little bit, and earlier we talked to Alan Dershowitz, who said Trump was well within his constitutional right to do this. Tim Kaine, on the other hand, this week introduced some sort of bill or whatnot to require the president to seek authorization of the use of military force, AUMF, from Congress. Is he right? Who's right, Dershowitz or Kaine? What do you, just tell me what they're saying.
Right. Everybody, I think, going back to Obama and going back to even Bush, would like for there to be new specific authorization of military forces related to whatever target the president is taking out. So what Tim Kaine's talking about here is this 2001-2002 authorization of military force was related to Al-Qaeda. President Obama, when he was striking Syria, he would go to Congress and say, I have authority to do this under that authorization, but I need a new one. Kind of like he was contradicting himself. I need a new one specifically for Syria and ISIS. The Trump administration claims, and they agree with Dershowitz here, we don't need a new one. This one that's 2 decades old fits. It's all terrorists. But if you talk to anybody, legal experts, Congress, administration officials, when they're not launching attacks, you'll hear it would be better legally to have something very specific to this action.
Better, and again, there is pretty much a black and white line when you come to due process, when you talk to constitutionality. So I want to move on to impeachment. Tell us where we stand on the impeachment process. What's Pelosi's looking? What's she looking at? What do the senators say is going to go down?
We're in a stalemate, Eric. I don't know how or when we're going to get out of this because you have Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell essentially winning this short-term battle about how and when to start a Senate trial by saying, you know what, my caucus doesn't care if we agree to have witnesses. We're ready to go. We're ready to start the trial and then talk about witnesses later. And Pelosi's reaction has been, to me, that doesn't seem fair, so I'm not handing over the articles of impeachment. I'm not letting you get started. I see McConnell digging in his heels, absolutely refusing to move, and I see Democrats...
Talk to me a little bit about, and the big issue is going to be, they need a simple majority in the Senate, not a supermajority, to vote on the rules. Rules would encompass whether or not more witnesses could come forward.
Right, and so they need a simple majority. The debate between Democrats and Republicans is this one vote? You vote on the rules, you vote on witnesses at the outset. And so when the trial starts, everyone has approved, we're going to call John Bolton, we're going to call Mick Mulvaney, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or what Republicans want, can we just have a majority vote to say the trial is going to be X weeks long, it'll be 6 days a week, and then a couple days or even weeks into that, why don't we vote on witnesses? McConnell doesn't outright say this, but his hope is that at that point, Senate Republicans will say, listen, we're all going to vote to acquit the president. Why would we even bother to have witnesses and drag this out even further?
I'm not going to ask you for an opinion, but does it blow you away the opposite sides that both the Republicans are on now when it has to do with Trump versus what it was like in 98 with Clinton, and how the Democrats have also switched sides on both the demand for the rules, the demand for the say, the demand for subpoena power, and the demand for just a measured, let's quit this right now. Both sides, opposite.
I mean, you're so right. You look at this 2 decades ago, you had McConnell saying, and I looked at this today actually, I want witnesses to testify against Bill Clinton. And you had Schumer saying, absolutely no witnesses, cut this trial short, let's get this thing over with.
I'm going to leave it right there. Amber Phillips, thank you so much. The Washington Post, The Fix, a must read, everybody. Everyone read The Fix. Amber's great. Thank you. And before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America this week. A hamburger that's almost the legal drinking age.
There it is. My gosh. It hasn't changed.
Dave Whipple told Sinclair station KUTV in Salt Lake City he bought the McDonald's hamburger in, get this, 1999. 20 years ago. The burger wound up in a coat pocket, forgotten about for years. After Whipple found it, he put it in a tin and kept it. Now he's hoping someone will offer him some big bucks for the age-defying burger and he can retire. Dave, it's probably worth the 79 dang cents you paid for it in 1999. We're not exactly loving it. And that's a wrap from the DC Swamp. We're going to say thank you all for watching. I'm Eric Bolling. See you next week.